Attack on Planet Falrus. Chapter 11. The minute I woke up, I knew something was wrong. Looking back, even 3 days in the second district hadn't erased the memory of my initial shock and horror at finding that I could not move my legs, for a soft, furry creature was lying heavily on my feet. I had thrown the bed covers open, and with a scream had jerked my feet from under the creature. It was then I noticed that the bed covers were not mine. I looked around me. The walls were different. This room was not my room. There was no second bed with a disheveled Gomi in it. I dashed to the window and looked out. Where was the sea? I put my hands on my head in panic. Was this a nightmare? I pinched myself and flinched with the pain. I turned around as a chorus of meows interrupted my thoughts. About 4 or 5 brown and white cats shot past me in a cloud of brown and white fur through my bedroom door, which now stood ajar, and down some stairs. I looked to see who had opened my door. I almost fainted at the sight before me. Who were these people? A young woman, she was younger than my mother, I thought, stood there with 2 little girls on either side of her. They were looking at me with as much surprise as I was them. Who are you? My voice was little more than a whisper. The woman's face seemed to relax after my question. She tried to smile at me, but I could tell she was a little frightened too. The younger of the 2 girls buried her face in the woman's dress. You must be Kieran Demba, she said in a kindly voice. I relaxed a bit. If she knew my name, she was probably friend, not foe. I am Genta, and these are my daughters, Triba and Orkivos. Genta, a man's voice sounded from below. What is it? Erufik, the boy from Falrus has arrived, she said to the man, not taking her eyes off me. I could hear the man's footsteps as he trod up the stairs. He came and stood in front of me, eyeing me with interest. Instinctively, I moved nearer the woman and girls. Kieran, I want you to meet my husband, Erufik. I looked at the tall man, then again at the woman. I was now certain I was no longer in Pascuando. I was in another world. Where am I? I managed to ask, as the woman took me gently by the shoulders and led me to the bed. She motioned me to sit down, and she sat next to me. The little girls followed us. The man remained standing. It's a long story, Kieran, she said. I figured it had to be. You are no longer on planet Falrus. You have been exchanged with our son, Bentel. He is now in your place in Falrus, and you are here. Many such exchanges are going on all over the districts. Our evil president and his right-hand man, Commander Bonzok, engineered this. They are planning something sinister, and our children are the victims. We have been ordered to look after you. Tomorrow, you will be summoned to go and see Commander Bonzok and his thugs. But don't worry, we'll protect you. We know that somewhere within Landesimag, your parents are looking after our Bentel. During the course of that Thursday, I learned a lot about my new family. Mr. Vosh was a postman, and Mrs. Vosh was a housewife like Mom. Triba and Orkivos were 6 and 4, respectively, and the cat Aisha had 4 kittens named Broka, Fajik, Mentam, and Kuth. The Voshes, like most families in the districts, were poor. Theirs was the oldest and creakiest house I had ever been in, but it was clean, tidy, and cozy. I liked them, but missed my own family terribly. I didn't know when I would see my family again. I told them all about my family and friends. I told them about my brothers, Square, Mom. I stopped suddenly as I remembered something. Auntie Genta looked concerned and asked me what the matter was. Tears welled up in my eyes as I said with a lump in my throat, "It's my mother's birthday the day after tomorrow." That had been the day before yesterday. Yesterday, I had been woken up very early in the morning by Anjidenta. "Giren," she said softly to me, "Commander Bonzok's men are coming to take you away for interrogation. Tell them everything you know. Don't try to outsmart them. They could harm you. If you tell them what they want to know, they'll bring you back tonight. If you don't, I'm not sure how long they'll keep you. Be brave, child, and no harm will come to you." I did as she told me. When Commander Bonzok's men came in the army truck to get me, I was ready for them. I made no fuss as they bundled me into the back. I was taken out of the 2nd District and into the 1st District where Commander Bonzok and the President were waiting for me. Thursday, 13th August, 10 p.m. It was a hoax, wasn't it? Surely it had to be. The voice simply stated, "We have your boy, Giren. His life could depend on you. Destroy your ozone block and you can have him back safe and sound." Book had interrupted at this point and asked, "Who are you?" The voice had curtly replied, "Your future king," and had hung up. This was the 3rd strange nuclear telephone conversation Book had had today. The first had been this morning when he had rung his family in Pascuando and had asked to speak with Giren. He had asked Giren to give him Square's nuclear phone number, but Giren seemed less than willing. He had given him a spiel about top-secret stuff. In addition, Giren had tried to make light his previous bragging about how advanced Professor Potty was. Book got nowhere with the boy. He eventually hung up with the feeling all was not quite right. Halfway through his takeaway dinner in his office, he had been bleeped by Miss Kando from the office. She had told him he was wanted on the nuclear phone. It was Kanon. She was in a state. She said Giren and Square had disappeared. They had been together since lunchtime, and she had been expecting Giren back home at 4. It was now 6 o'clock, and he hadn't turned up. She had rung Square's parents, thinking they may have decided to stay the night there, but Square's mother had no idea where the pair was. Giren had changed, she was saying amidst sobs. Since Sunday, he had been acting weird. He was disruptive and disobedient. He was forever in the company of that sullen boy Square, who was also causing havoc in his home, according to his mother. The two of them were ruining the vacation, and she was at her wit's end, she said. Book told her not to worry. Giren would turn up. He was probably on his way home now. Keenan had said she hoped so, and hung up, not before giving Book the Takanon's number. Book sat at his desk thinking, the rest of his dinner abandoned. It all seemed to fit together now. Recent complaints about Giren's behavior, and then this nuclear phone call saying they had his son. His mind raced back to the post-breakfast conversation he had had with Professor Bradakas. The old man had been sure there was to be an invasion of some kind on Falrus. And this boy Square, where did he fit into all this? From what he'd heard about his recent behavior, he was surprised Giren was hanging out with him. And what about Gomi? He too was a friend of Square's. Why were there no complaints about him? Why hadn't he gone out playing with the other two? It seemed apparent to Book that Gomi was being shut out by the two boys for some reason. Unless there was a horrid idea forming itself in his mind. All the evidence pointed toward his new conclusion. The existence of an interplanetary nuclear magnetic energy source proved by the findings at Krambeti, the strange behavior of his son and his friend, all of a sudden, the threatening nuclear phone call. But wait a minute, why Giren? He realized now why Square would be attractive to potential kidnappers in the old world. The boy genius had indeed built a high-performance prototype robot. He was sure of it now. But why take Gearan too? Obviously, his friendship with Square was not the only factor here, because that applied to Gomi too. It also wasn't the fact that Gearan was his son, the son of a leading scientist involved in Operation Animal Kingdom. There were 4 boys to choose from there. No, there must be something else that made Gearan stand out, Book decided. Something Gearan knew that his brothers didn't. Then he remembered the strange request to go to the local hills with Square. Could it be that they were onto something? Gomi was not included in that particular episode. Maybe Gearan knew something about the old world aliens. Knew something about something the old world aliens wanted to know. Something Gearan knew and Gomi didn't. The secret cameras must have picked up on that easily. Book began to wish he had pressed Gearan for the real reason behind his wish to go to Loku. There was only one way to confirm all this, and Book knew how. All of a sudden, he wished he'd known about Professor Potty earlier. Picking up the nucleophone receiver, he dialed PQ 5894-9203. Mr. Takanan answered on the first ring. He was obviously sitting by the nucleophone waiting to hear from the boys or anyone else with news of them. The disappointment at realizing it was neither of these was almost tangible in his voice. It was not lost on Book, who understood. "What can I do for you, Book?" Square's father asked finally, after they had talked about the boys for a while, skirting the main issue at hand. "I would like to have a word with your daughter," Book replied. "It's very important. She's the only one who can provide answers to some vital questions I have." Gearan had mentioned that Square's sister had helped build this robot. She was his only hope at the moment. "Hello, Dr. Demba." A girl's voice came over the line. "I'm Kefra, Square's sister." "Hello, Kefra." "Listen carefully, Kefra," Book said, softening his voice so as not to scare the girl. "I want you to find me the robot's programmer. Get your dad to send it to me via Transpotron. It's very important." Kefra did not wait for him to say more. "But it's gone, Dr. Demba," she said. "When I realized that Square had taken Professor Potty out to play when it was my turn, I went to the spot where I always kept my copy of the programmer to order Professor Potty home. But it was too late. It was gone. Square never used to touch my programmer, and I never touched his. I guess things are different now." Book had half expected this. Things had been too good to be true. A major setback like this was in the offing for sure. Professor Potty was probably lying somewhere, disconnected, his energy source removed. Now the interplanetary nuclear magnetic transportron, the only hope he had of finding the boys and winning this war with the old world life forms, could not be put into action. Book only realized he was still on the nucleophone when Kefra's voice asked, "Are you still there, Dr. Demba?" "Oh yes, Kefra, I'm sorry. My mind wandered off a bit," he said hastily. "I don't know if you'll find this significant," she said, "but my brother has been talking to himself a lot lately. In the middle of our game of Scrabble the other night, he said he was going to the kitchen for a drink of milk. Anyway, I followed him on tiptoe to the kitchen, and there I heard him talking to himself. There was also the sound of a kind of nuclear radio coming out the kitchen. I couldn't see because he had closed the door behind him. I thought that was strange, because we had left our nuclear radio at home in Dres. I just thought you should know. It's happened more than once." "Thank you, Kefra," Book said. "You've been more than helpful." "Goodbye, Dr. Demba." "Goodbye." Book hung up and stood up. He walked slowly to the window and looked out onto the street below. He was immersed in deep thought when Dr. Voltin burst into the room out of breath and in a rage. "They've got my daughter, Book," he said angrily. "They've got me by the nape of the neck. I'm going to spill the beans. I'll tell them everything about our investigation. I want my daughter back." "Calm down, Saki," Book said gently to his friend, going to him and placing his hand on his shoulder. "They've got my son too. I guess they've got just about everyone's child who works on this project by now. We are going to fight them tooth and nail, Saki. You have my word on that. These bullies from the old world think they can get away with anything, but they are wrong. They're up against SIS, and boy, are they in for trouble." "I hope you're right, Book," Dr. Voltin said. "I am," Book said, feeling a lot less confident than he made out to his friend. After Saki was calm again and breathing evenly, Book went in search of Miss Candle. "Call all the members of Operation Animal Kingdom together, wherever they may be. We are going to have a meeting here in Old X Pond." "Yes, sir, right away," she said, and started making the necessary nucleophone calls. It's gone far beyond a joke now, Book thought. These people mean business, but they are going to get more than they bargained for. Chapter 12. Friday, 14th August, 2 p.m. The trip to Iniswam had been uneventful so far. Professor Potty's speed was constant, and the robot was showing no signs of fatigue. Just as well. There was no room for error on this mission. Their lives depended on it. Heine Cutish and Bentel Vosh were seated comfortably in the robot's arms as he flew steadily over Yoda's palace. There was a tough task ahead, but they were certain they could handle it. Professor Potty was with them after all, and he could do just about anything. Yesterday, Heine had received instructions from Commander Bonzok by nuclear radio waves to kidnap Bunda Shepwat, the Prince of Falrus. Since he could not destroy Professor Potty because the monitor would respond only to Square or Kefra's fingerprints, Commander Bonzok had said over the nuclear radio that he was to use Professor Potty for the job, and he was to take Bentel Vosh, alias Girendemba, with him. He was to lure Bundash to a safe place until he, Commander Bonzok, gave him further instructions. Yoda's palace was majestic as well as dreamlike. Built by Yoda, the first king of Falrus, thousands of years ago, it stood tall and glorious next to the equally majestic and beautiful Yoda's mountains, partly separating the region of Pinteres from Anparia. It was now the home of Hybok Hepwat, the present king of Falrus. The palace was surrounded by a huge gate and a 20-foot wall, not to talk of 100 soldiers spanning its whole perimeter. The two boys knew their flying robot would be spotted, but they were not worried. They could handle it. As they had hoped, Bundash Hepwat was outside in the palace grounds playing with his dog. All they had to do was swoop down and grab him. Professor Potty was so fast, no one would realize what had happened until they were far away in a safe place. They descended cautiously. A soldier spotted them and came running up, calling his colleagues via nuclear radio as he did so. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" he shouted. Professor Potty prepared himself for a bumpy landing. Bunda Shepwat looked up. "Wow," he exclaimed, "a flying robot." "Come and join us," Heine shouted to him. The soldier approached Bundash. "Get into the house, Bundash," he shouted, reaching for the boy's hand. Professor Potty kicked the soldier's helmet off. Other soldiers came running. They had their rifles at the ready. "Quick, Professor Potty, take the boy," Bentel shouted to the robot. Shots were fired. A wire in Professor Potty's leg was cut. A smoke escaped. An alarm sounded, and more soldiers appeared. Professor Potty used his other leg to kick the soldier who was holding Bundash. He fell, and the robot grabbed the boy with his legs. "Fly, Professor, fly!" Heine cried. The robot began a tentative ascent. More shots were fired at his body. A wire in his chest blew up. "Running out of energy," the robot reported, as more leads blew up in his legs. "Let me go!" Bundash was wrenching free from the weakening legs of the robot. "Put me down!" Professor Potty looked down onto the ground below. Sparks were flying all over him as the bullets from the soldiers' rifles hit him. "Watch out, children," he cried with one last effort as he came crashing down on the ground just outside the palace, missing the crowd of soldiers below by inches. Heine Cutish felt himself somersaulting in the air. He was no longer tagging onto Professor Potty. He remembered this feeling of being weightless. Where had he felt this way before? Ah, yes, in the interplanetary nuclear magnetic transpotron. That's how he had got to Falrus. His head was reeling and visions of his home in the 5th district flooded his mind. He was back at home, sitting on the veranda, eating ice cream with Vishta, Judinsta, and Prish. Uncle Lokrum was there too with Auntie Dairy and Baby Canikin. Daddy was smoking his pipe as usual and watching a wrestling match on nuclear TV. He and Uncle Lokrum were shouting at the little portable nuclear TV while Mama sat on her special garden chair doing her knitting in the sun. The frogs in the pond croaked noisily while Ganivi slept like a log. He remembered the day the police had come for him. He had been so scared. Now he was scared for a different reason. Commander Bonsok had given him further instructions last night. He was to destroy the quantoscope on the local hills. Now that there were many more of these quantoscopes all over planet Falrus, they had no more need for the prototype. Bonsok wanted it destroyed to prevent anyone using it to reactivate Professor Potty. It was a top job, Commander Bonsok had said sternly. "Mess it up and you are in trouble, kid," had been the curt parting line. Heine looked slowly down. He was getting nearer and nearer to the ground. It was blindingly fast. Thoughts of Commander Bonsok's threats flooded his mind. What was he going to do? Help! Help! He was still thinking of that awful day in the transportron when he fell heavily to the ground. He saw a flash of light and then complete darkness engulfed him. Commander Bonsok's face showed signs of stress. "Try again," he said to the young man at the microphone. "Maybe he's in a room full of people and he can't talk," he said. "No, sir," the young man said. "There is a harsh tone which indicates interference, sir. I am simply not getting through, and Heine appears not to hear me. Either there is no reception or his receiver is malfunctioning." "Try Bentel Vosh," the commander suggested. "All right, sir." The young man worked at the keys on his desk for a few minutes. Commander Bonsok looked on in silence. A few garbled sounds came over the microphone. "I can hear something," Commander Bonsok sucked in his breath. "It's the same tone as before, sir." Again, no contact with Bentel. "Is it the ozone block? Have they completed the sound block?" "No, sir, not yet. They still have 900,000 square miles to go. We should still be able to communicate with our agents in Falrus until next Thursday. I have calculated the time it should take to complete the sound barrier, sir. It seems to me if Falrusians work 24 hours a day, using all their resources, they should finish around midnight, give or take a few minutes." "Then what's going on? Why can't we contact our agents, as she so eloquently put it?" "I have no idea, sir. Maybe..." "Find out. What do we pay you for?" "But, sir, there is..." "No buts. Do as I say." "Yes, sir." Commander Bonzok left the system's control unit in a rage. Without Bunda's Hepwat, they were doomed. The Falrusians would see it as a national insult if their precious prince were kidnapped. He could not understand why he had lost contact with those kids. What were they up to? He blamed Commander Nellit. It was his fault his so-called trainees were useless. He should bear the consequences of this mess, not him. He had personally done a lot more for this half-galaxy than all the other officers put together. He took the elevator to his private study. He came here whenever he needed to clear his head and find fresh ideas. He sat on his favorite chair and smoked a cigar. Maybe that Demba boy would know something. He had been cooperative so far, the most useful child out of all those who'd been snapped up from Falrus. That Takanan boy was as tough as nails. He just wouldn't budge. He was not exactly forthcoming with information, but he had his best men working on him. He had warned the president about him. That boy hadn't uttered a word since he got here. He had sent him back to the Q-tishes in the 5th district after many hours of questioning. They would send for him again, and this time the boy would talk. Oh yes, he would talk. Commander Bonzok would personally see to that. Meanwhile, it was high time Giren Demba paid him another visit. There had to be a way out. He dialed the Vosh's number. Mr. Vosh picked up. "I'm sending my men over to get the boy," was all he said. There was no need to introduce himself. Everyone in the district knew his voice well. Half an hour later, Giren Demba was before him. He looked frightened, but his chin was high. Commander Bonzok smiled in spite of himself. He liked this boy. He had something of the proud warrior about him. He wished he had a son like this boy. Stopping himself from thinking these soft thoughts, the commander stood up from his comfortable chair and tucked his truncheon under his arm. He had to look authoritative, frightening even. This boy had to be shown that he, Commander Bonzok, was in charge. He was the boss, answerable to no one except the president. "Giren," he said in a businesslike voice. "Yes, sir," the boy said, his voice betraying his inner fear. "What can you tell me about this robot of your friend's?" "Professor Potty? Is that his name? How amusing." Commander Bonzok smiled in spite of himself. "So, what do you know about Professor Potty? What can he do to help us?" "I don't know what you mean, sir." "I mean, how can I get Professor Potty over here from Falrus?" "I don't know, sir," Giren replied. "The only thing I know is his code number." "Yeah?" Commander Bonzok said. "What is it?" XL444358. Anyone who enters that number into his programmer could get him to obey specific orders, sir. "What if the programmer cannot be found?" "Then I'm afraid there's nothing anyone can do, sir." "That will be all, Giren," Commander Bonzok said, satisfied that the boy was telling the truth. "Yes, sir." Giren walked to the door and opened it. A guard standing outside stepped aside to let him pass. More guards followed him outside to a waiting car. Soon he was on his way back to the Vosh's. He couldn't believe his luck. That went smoothly, he thought. He let out a huge sigh of relief. He thought of his family in Falrus. How he missed them.